Hello everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Lookout Sir 40k podcast, a Warhammer 40,000 podcast, made, developed, produced by a multitude of people, but at the same time, mostly me, Dan, and my good buddy, Joe. How you doing, Joe?
I am very, very good today. Thank you very much.
Is that on account of the fact that we're recording this particular segment without Phil's input?
Yes. We're going old school. We're going back to the OG crew.
The original peoples. That's the way it was, absolutely. Although, that being said, I don't want to sort of suggest that we're enjoying the lack of attendance by Phil. He's a busy boy with things to do, so, it's fair enough. But at the same time, he's always very critical of when you don't manage to turn up, Joe. So, equally, we should just be as mean, surely.
Sure, yes, definitely.
Absolutely.
We should boo him. We should flog him in the streets. We should get that crazy, tall, scary lady from Game of Thrones to shout shame at him.
Yes.
Everywhere he goes.
He deserves only the utmost of pain and suffering for his transgressions. But really, he's very busy, and believe it or not, we're filming this, or rather recording this, incredibly late, because right now it's about 10 o'clock on the Friday night before this thing goes out. So we're rushing around to try and get it done, because the last 2 weeks have been manic for all involved, and we haven't had the time to get things done for reasons that aren't entirely clear to me, really, when I look back on it. But we've been busy, and that's essentially led us to this place. But busy doing what? I hear you ask.
I feel like because he's not here to defend himself, we should blame it entirely on Phil.
Well, that is also true. But maybe not. Maybe not. I know that, Phil will almost certainly listen to this and throw all sorts of, rude and mean remarks our way, should we be rude and mean to him. Which is only fair, really, I suppose.
I think, yeah.
I love how easily swayed you are. Just like, yeah, alright, whatever. I don't know. I've got no backbone. No ideas of my own. Whatever you say goes.
He'll say things about how superior his beard is in comparison to mine, I imagine.
I don't know. I think your beard's getting quite formidable now, Joe. Quite strong in the beard.
I'm gonna go full, maybe not full bird's eye. Maybe, like, I kind of thought about going down the bassist from System of a Down, kind of like weird, scraggly, long thing.
Oh yeah.
And it'd be terrifying, I imagine.
Do you remember that time where the good people of Birdseye made Captain Birdseye into a younger, more kind of energetic character, and he used to go around in a submarine with kids trying to fight evil. That was a very weird time in Captain Birdseye's history.
Yeah, especially because he didn't really do anything. He made the children do it.
Well, I believe so, yeah, absolutely. I can't remember all the itty-bitty details, but I definitely remember them going for a more kind of extreme, cutting-edge, youthful, almost kind of David Tennant, Doctor Who type vibe with him.
Oh, I don't remember that, but it does feel like something they would have done, like 2004, 2005.
Yeah.
Like revamping his image style.
These kids just ain't eating enough fish fingers. What we got to get done? We got to get the youth. Got to make it more cool. Get him in a long trench coat and have him running around like Neo from the Matrix, throwing fish fingers at people. Hiya!
It surprises me because I probably speak for half of the British nation. I flipping love fish fingers. Like, There's no point in my life when I've eaten a fish fingers and I've been disappointed. It's always that food. The fish fingers is always those food that you kind of forget about its actual existence until you're hungover.
I'm a keen fan of ensuring that I have a solid staple, a solid selection of freezer favourites that always must be in my freezer at all times. So, if you check any of my freezers, there's always a box of fish fingers, a a southern fried chicken grill thing from Birdseye as well. The breadcrumby one, the crummy one.
Oh, yeah. I know the crummy one.
Yeah, you got to have the crummy one. Some frozen peas and some McCain home fried chips or whatever they are. The nice thick frozen chips. You've got to have that in every freezer because sometimes you don't want to go out and do the shopping, and sometimes you don't want to try that hard to cook things. And that assortment of items there can make a fine freezery meal in no time at all.
Yeah, and you never have like one, like you never like stop at 3 fish fingers, do you?
No.
It's always like the extreme end, like 6 or 7. If you offered someone like 4, they'd look at you as if you'd suggested that like people were actually giant lizards. Like they just think you were mad.
Not that we want to necessarily suggest that people who think people are giant lizards are themselves mad. I mean, potentially it's more likely that they're not giant lizards, but I can understand the rationale that lead people to believe these sorts of things.
I suppose. If you're going to be diplomatic about it, but...
I'm always really intrigued by all of that side of things. Not that I'm into it myself. I'm not of the opinion that people are giant lizards, but that sounds like an all more exciting version of events than probably what really is going on.
I thought it was the royal family that are lizards, aren't they? They're like the leader lizards.
They could well be. I mean, that's the thing, right? I mean, for all we know, when what's her name? She's the princess of something or other. She's married to the prince that will be king. Harry? Prince Harry. Is it Prince Harry?
Kate Middleton.
It's Kate Middleton. Yeah, it's her. When she had a baby, did she really have a baby? Or did she just put on like a pretend bump and then they incubated a load of lizard eggs and then she picked her favourite? I'm just asking. I don't know. I mean, I don't know the answers. I'm just curious.
She picked the most colourful royal egg.
She went through the ceremonial eating of the undesirable lizard babies until she found the one she didn't want to eat. And that sounds so much more awesome than probably what actually happened. So but there you go. That's how the world works. Maybe we could diversify our portfolio of work into mad conspiracy theories that we're not all that sure about. That'd be fun.
Like the Fahrenheit guy. Like the Zeitgeist people.
The Fahrenheit and or Zeitgeist people.
Yeah.
I think, Joe, we're wandering into a world where we're completely unqualified to talk about things.
Oh, definitely. This is the point where Phil would be like, should we talk about something 40k?
Yeah,
I think
that is also one of the real values that Phil adds to the show, and I think that's always something that we need to emphasise about the goodness that is having Phil here. If it wasn't for Phil, it would all be pretty, it'd be very
It'd be a very different podcast, wouldn't it?
It would be. We wouldn't get very much 40k done. We just drift into these mad topics about the sort of things we were talking about before. But there you go. That's that and all of those things. So on the topic of 40k, as you beautifully brought it back around to, Joe, what have you been up to lately in the wondrous realm of 40k?
I've been painting more of my Dark Eldors. Getting all those done. And then the problem is because I'm playing so many different kind of like practice games at the moment. I keep changing my list. So I keep painting stuff. And I'm all excited, and I play with them, and I'm like, "Oh, this doesn't really work." And then I have to go off and get something out and paint that.
Well, that's inevitable, though, isn't it? I mean, I've gone through that process so many times when it comes to playtesting and building and optimizing, and I'm really hopeful that what I'm working on at the moment does work as well as I hope it does, because I spent quite a lot of money on getting it to this point, so it would be a bit of a frustration if all of a sudden I discovered that actually, oh God, it's really awful. But I'm kind of committed to it. I think one way or the other, it's going to be what it's going to be when it comes around to Grand Tournament Heat 2, which in future episodes we're going to start talking about. We're going to get into the habit of talking about people's army list plans. So we'll have a full complement of Lookout Sir, alumni coming along to Heat 2. Big congratulations to the wonderful fellow who won Heat 1, the guy with the Gene Stealer Cult army list. Which was really exciting to see Gene Stealer Cult coming into the fore. So old James McKenzie, that fella did a fantastic job coming first place with Gene Stealer Cult at GT Heat 1. I hope to follow in his footsteps and get first place at GT Heat 2. Go for the double, Joe. be the first fella to get 2 GT Heat first place finishes. Wouldn't that be something?
Not unless I get there before you. I won't. Like, let's be clear. I'm kidding myself. But it would be a nice idea. If I didn't have to play against you and had the usual easy ride that you always seem to have, it would be fine.
It's true. I am often blessed with an easy ride. I don't know quite how that always comes to pass. But that is the way it goes. But no, James is a good lad, and he plays really, 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 really well. I've had the good pleasure of chatting to him on a few occasions. Never had the privilege of playing him, actually, which is probably advantageous. It's probably that lucky streak that you talk about there, Joe, on account of the fact that I think James came second at GT Heat 3 when I won that one, meaning that most likely, had I actually played against him, I would have been beaten soundly. But as it was, I played against Tom from Honest Wargamer and his Orcs in the final game and smashed him up good. Mainly because I seized the initiative on him. But, fortunately for me, he never reminds me of that whenever I see him. That was said with irony.
Is it because he's so humble?
I mean, well, he's very honest, I think, is the way we would approach that. And no, Tom's great. Tom is really great, actually, to be fair. And a great player. I mean, that's the weird thing once you linger into the top table end of Warhammer World events. It's full of really, really great players with really good attitudes and really great armies. It's sometimes it's more the mid-tables where you can end up in some very weird, ugly exchanges with some very strange folk, but not always. Not always.
I always find the mid-tables near the end of day 2 is full of really obscure armies. You wouldn't for some reason they're like amazing against one specific army, and they'll just wreck it. But against everyone else, they do not that great. The amount of times I've kind of mooched around that area, and then on my last game of the weekend, I'm like, I've got 3 wins and a loss, and I'm like, could possibly get a 4th win, and I'm running my knight army, and I come up against a guy who's got Gilliman and 97 las cannons. It's like, how? What madman came up with this idea? And then obviously the person playing it, but they'll destroy it. No doubt my last game at the Heat 2 is going to come up against a guy with Space Wolves with loads of Sicarans and loads of Leviathans.
It's going to be Gilliman and 3 Terminus Ultras.
Yeah. Just absolutely just blowing my tiny little space elf ships off of the board.
Yeah, so that would be 24 las cannons, re-rolling to hit, re-rolling to wounds, because the Terminus Ultra is that Land Raider that's got 8 las cannons on it. All the fun. It's completely overpointed, though. 410 or 420 points for that thing. It's mad expensive for what it is. But, it's made all the better when you've got good old Bobby G standing next to him.
Yeah, he does help him out somewhat.
He does. He does. You only get one... Unless you're an Imperial Knight player, you only get 1 command point for a super heavy detachment, right? Oh no, you get 3 still, don't you?
What's that for?
Super heavy detachments always generate 3. It's just weirdly for Imperial Knights it can generate 6. Is that correct?
No, I think it is 6 now. Oh no, it's 3.
But Imperial Knights can make it 6 if they take 3 different types of the Lancer Knights, right?
It has to be. Yeah, it has to be Lancer and above, I think.
So if you took Bobby G, 3 Terminus Ultras, and Bobby G was your Warlord, so Bobby G's 400, they're 410, I think, so they're 12,000, well, not 12,000, 1,230 points, and then Bobby G is 400 points, bringing you up to 1,630. Yeah, 1,630? Yeah, that's right, isn't it? That's numbers. And then, I don't know, I guess you could take... Lord knows what you could take in addition to that. Oh, you could take an assassin, I suppose. And that's more or less 1,750 points. That's an army. There you go. And that army would have 9 command points, -2 for the assassin stratagem. Because Bobby G gives you free, the detachment gives you free, and your Battleforged. It's all right. It's not a bad situation to be in. Could actually be relatively reasonable as well.
Apart from against your list, which we will talk about closer to the time.
Well, potentially. I mean, look, who knows, right? I mean, again, my list is subject to a number of changes. I don't want to get into the habit of overhyping it because then, at the same time, I'll end up almost certainly losing all my games and feeling a little bit humbled. But you never know. I'm aspirational, as always is the way. And on the topic of aspirational things, I suppose we should get on and tell you about what we're going to be talking about for the rest of this show. So kicking things off, we're just going to do a quick kind of news roundup with me and Joe because Phil's not here. And as I said before, it's now 10:30 in the evening and this thing needs to be edited and put up on the internet so as it's available for people to enjoy as of 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. So I'm super keen just to get this kind of wrapped up in a relatively succinct fashion. So we're going to have a relative quick roundup talking about Apocalypse and or other news related items. The Emperor's Spears, they reminded us of the existence of those, and there's some more Apocalypse stuff, and I think there's a new Sergeant or some nonsense for a special day of the week that's coming around. Again, we'll be more succinct when we get around to talking about it, but those are broadly the things of the news. Then, as it transpires, we found out that Magic the Gathering are getting a fancy new TV series directed by fancy, clever Hollywood people. And also the latest episode of Astartes came out from the good people who make that show about Astartes, which we thought was really, really excellent and really, really cool. So because of that, we started thinking, if we were going to do some sort of movie about Warhammer 40,000, what might that be about, and why would we want to do that? So that's a topic that we're going to talk about, but a lot of it is us mostly gushing about how cool Astartes is. And then to close things out, it's going to be the return of the end of the show quiz. So Rich has come back for a new fantastic episode of, or rather a new fantastic edition of the end of the show quiz. Who will win, I wonder, in this incredible addition to our ongoing quiz series? Who could say, eh, Joe?
I know. I'm not going to spoil it.
There you go. That's brave of you and wise. But with that said, guys, despite the fact he's not here, let's move on to Phil's jingo. Go on to Phil's jingle to hear about the news.
Get your ears ready, chaps, because it's time for the news!
So the first of the news stories that we want to talk about that are related to Warhammer 40,000 and Warhammer 40,000 products is the fact that the Battle Sister that has been shown, painted and pictured in various Battle Sister bulletin boards is the thing that will be available, or rather the exclusive miniature that will be available for Warhammer Day when that comes around relatively soon, June 29th. So a week today, June 29th. You will be able to go into stores and buy this rather lovely Sisters of Battle model, or rather the Adepta Sororitas Sister Superiora model, which is all quite lovely, I suppose. Joe, what do you reckon? Are you excited? Will you run out and buy yourself one of these lovely Sister Superiora thingy-mabobby models?
I'm always on the fence about these kind of things, because I'll go out, I'll buy it, and it will sit in its box for about 3 months. I'll never put it together, and then I'll sell it because I know I'll never use it. Now, I'm not one of those people that just keeps sealed boxes in the house for like 10 years, because it might be worth something in the future. But the bottom is, I want to stay strong and not start a new army like for this year. But I feel if I get that model, build it and paint it, I'm going to want to do Sisters when they come out.
And it's always a risk.
Yeah, because it is such a beautiful model, and because it's resin, isn't it, as well? Or is it plastic, do we know?
I would imagine it's plastic. Now that you ask, I've not seen anything that states one way or the other. Yeah,
because if it's the resin stuff, they've released a lot of their models in, like Eisenhorn and stuff. They've been really good, like super crisp, super nice. So it might just be a model that you kind of paint and then put on the shelf forever. and then not really do the rest of army. Like it bodes well though for Sisters players and the future of that army if they're going to stay in that kind of quality. But,
yeah, I think the thing is for me is Warhammer Day is a bit of a weird thing because they announced it at the start of June as this fantastic join us on a celebration on June 29th where we're going to, celebrate all things Warhammer because we've got this new logo and to celebrate that we're going to have this cool exclusive model for you and that's going to be excellent and all this sort of stuff. But as it turns out, it's not an exclusive model. It's just an early release of a model for an army that not everyone necessarily is going to want to rush out and buy. I mean, I'm obviously not under the illusion that Adeptus Sororitas Sisters of Battle is not going to be a huge release for Games Workshop and that a lot of people will be buying them. But at the same time, it does seem a little bit sort of south of my expectations as towards what I thought was going to potentially be made available for a Warhammer Day. I would have probably have preferred one of those more kind of historically inspired, incredible kind of diorama-esque miniatures that they've done for previous things in the past, such as when they did I think it was either the 20th or the 25th anniversary of Warhammer 40,000, where they did the Crimson Fist standing by the banner from the old Rogue Trader cover, or when they did the Blood Angel from the second edition box, cover, or when they did the John Blanche Sisters of Battle inspired miniature. There's so many incredible opportunities or occasions where they've taken kind of historical references from a historical, not historical as such, but retro or vintage Warhammer 40,000 and built incredible new modern miniatures out of it. And I was super excited to see if they do something really cool like that. But as it turns out, they just went, well, we have no real ideas. Let's just early release something that's going to come out towards the end of the year. Which also, as well, to me, kind of removes quite a lot of the impetus, as it were, in needing to rush out and get this thing. Because by all accounts, it will just be available to buy in a few months' time when you'll know whether it's worth actually collecting and playing and using. If you're looking at this as a gamer, obviously. If you're one of those wonderful people who just buy and collect and paint models, then fantastic. I'm sure you'll be really happy to get this early. But for me, it was just a bit like, it just seems a little bit underwhelming, especially after all the initial hype that they tried to generate around Warhammer Day. And it's like, whatever. It's certainly not something I like the model, looks great. I'm not going to buy it. It's nothing I'm interested in, essentially, for me. So it is a super weird one to release a model that you're just going to be able to buy later on anyway. It's not like their standard like MO, as it were. But there is a chance that they might surprise us. I'm kind of disappointed they just didn't release, because they're re-releasing a new store, Birthday Space Marine Sergeant. That's the next story. So let's not,
Yeah.
Well, unless you want to move on to that.
Well,
story.
when they release a Space Marine model, it's always better because everyone collects Space Marines. That makes sense.
Everyone does.
Yeah. Okay. There might be a few people out there right now, but I don't collect Space Marines. But more people collect Space Marines than they do anything else. So more people are going to want to buy that model to put into their army. So to release a model for an army that's not even out yet doesn't really make sense to me.
I mean, the army is out, right? So you can still the army is available in old metals and da 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 da. But the thing is that, like I said, I'm not. Warhammer Day felt like a bit of it came out of nowhere, and I thought, maybe it'll be a exciting, interesting thing that they're going to do and really get behind it and do some cool stuff, and really excited to see what the miniature ends up being. And in the end, what the miniature ends up being is just an early release thing, which is fine. I'm not saying it's bad, and I think it's good that people can get early access to these really, really great sculpts for the Sisters of Battle, because as I've said throughout, I really like what they're doing with this release and this range based on everything they've shown. I just think, again, it was one of those things where it's like, could have been a lot better. But again, I'm nitpicking, right? I'm being a little bit sort of fidgety and a little bit, unfair potentially about how much awesomeness this model potentially represents. So if you're excited for it, great. It's just not something I'm overly bothered about.
I would echo that basically.
Yeah.
It's because what else are they releasing for the? I think the whole Warhammer Day release lot is incredibly meh, like at best.
Yep, I would agree with you there. But they always are. It's always like the supplementary merchandise stuff that you always like. You can get a Games Workshop bag, or some badges, or wristbands, or this dice bag, and it's like, yeah, I mean, it's all nice, but nothing I actually want. So there you go. But anyway, on the topic of store anniversaries and or special occasions within the Games Workshop calendar, they have also unveiled this lovely new store anniversary model in the form of a Primaris, not Lieutenant, but Primaris Sergeant, no less. Yeah. What's your feelings on Primaris Sergeant, Joe?
I really like this model and what it represents, because it's like a cool little squad upgrade. It's not like the endless parade of lieutenants that we've had, and it's quite good for me, because as a little group, as all the people on the podcast, we're going to do like a small 1,000 point army thing. And I've chosen to do Crimson Fists, and he is perfect for Crimson Fists because he's got his chainsword buried into the head of an orc. And it sets the scene for my army quite beautifully.
He is also covered in battle damage, isn't he? Which is no bad thing for a Crimson Fist.
Oh yeah, it's a beautiful thing. And yeah, I just think it's really nice. And I'd like to see this going forward as a thing. So they'll release like a cool, let's say like a Inceptor model, or a really cool Hellblaster Sergeant. Just something that you can just put into an army. You're only going to have the one of them, and it'll be cool like that. Yeah, I'm happy with him. I like him.
I totally agree with you. I mean, he's a great looking model for what he is. I think the only issue I have is the face and of the actual model and the kind of haircut they've gone for it. It's it definitely looks like a sort of it's a very different looking facial expression and kind of look for a Space Marine, but at the same time, I don't think that's inherently bad. And I think always with these things, when you see the model for real, it'll definitely hold up better in reality than it appears within the actual pictures, because that's one of the universal issues with a lot of these Games Workshop images, is that the pictures never quite do the model justice. But I think actually this one looks pretty impressive, and I'm intrigued to see how it turns out in the end. But again, another Space Marine model, not a lieutenant for a nice change of pace, but again, a sergeant. So this is the second, collector's edition, limited availability sergeant that they did. The last sergeant they did was for the 30th anniversary of 40k, was it, Joe?
It was the guy with a power fist, wasn't it? He had the power fist up in the air. He had like a bolter, didn't he? His leg up or something.
No, there was a Primaris sergeant that they did early doors.
They said it was a sergeant, but it looked exactly like the Marine that you get for free when you go in and have a painting lesson. All he had was a dagger and a purity seal. The only thing that made him different, but they charged you 20 quid for him instead.
Oh, I think it was more than 20 quid, maybe. It was like 25, 30 quid.
Jesus.
I know. I actually bought that thing as well. I have no idea what was coming over me at the time. I was obviously in, fevered 40k mode at that point.
You saw it and you were like, this has to go into my collection of models.
Yep.
I will be just empty without it.
That's it. But then quickly, it was whatever. But yeah, there you go. So that's some new nice things that are coming along. And on the topic of new nice things, obviously you can't talk about all the new stuff that's happening without mentioning the wondrous world of Apocalypse. So for those of you who have been sleeping under a rock, Apocalypse is happening, which is pretty exciting for those who like to play Apocalypse games. As we've said, or I've said in the past, I don't much care for Apocalypse because those gigantic scale of games, although they keep sort of promising that, oh, don't worry, you can play it in an hour, or you can play it in a second, or da-da-da-da-da. It's one of those things where it's like, yeah, you can make those kind of claims, and mechanically speaking, it probably does only take a few hours to play, but it's still going to take you an awfully long time to transport, set up, think about. Again, there's so many supplementary rules within what I'm seeing for Apocalypse in terms of all the new stratagems, all the new things. It's a whole new game system that's going to require a lot of time and energy and effort trying to understand and get to grips with, because there's lots of bolt-on rules and new nuanced things that you need to start thinking about. And obviously that's great because they've taken a massive game of, massive 40k game and made it easier to be played. But to me, it just always sort of seems like, yeah, but I just don't believe it, because I just think people will spend a lot of time playing this game, or if they do play this version of the game, being all confused and having to go through the rigors of thinking about and learning what they need to do, and no one will have actually thought about it before they turn up. So, if we as a group were like, right, let's play a 6,000 point aside game, and we turned up at Warhammer World and we're like, we're going to do the Apocalypse rules, and it's like, cool, has anyone read what they're doing? No, I just brought my army. Isn't it just 40k? No. Oh, God. All right, hang on. What's this, Al? What's happening? What do you mean it's not dead? Oh, there's other rules. Why? Oh, can we just break off and just play 40k? We've spent 3 hours and we haven't even started yet. I've just been watching you set up and talk about ideas. Oh, well, yeah, but, it's what we came here for. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. I'm going off on a tangent, but my point is Apocalypse doesn't work the way they say it works. It works great if you're a bunch of Games Workshop employees. But anyway, I rant on. Joe, what are you thinking?
I've always found that Apocalypse always requires a lot of admin before the game even starts, in terms of who's hosting the game, like who's going to be on what side, and that's always an argument in itself. And then it's an argument of like how many points each person uses. Like I think I've said before, like Apocalypse Best is played as 3,000 points per person in my head. But then there's always one guy who's like, I want to do 10,000 points per person because I've got 4 Warhounds and 3 Baneblades. I want to use all of them. So then there's that kind of madness involved. And then you
also end up in situations, right? And you've seen this so many times when people play Apocalypse games. You get the guy with his Imperial Knight army who goes, I want to play Apocalypse. And it's like, all right, cool. Here's my Imperial Knight army. All right, great. And then they end up facing off against just a slightly more body count version of a normal 40k army. Or it's, here's all my Titans and specialized Apocalypse units. And it's like, yeah, cool, here's all my Space Marines. And it's always the way where it's like, it's just tedious because all the it's an arms race that no one ever really wanted to be involved in, so no one's ever really bothered with. And you've always got that one mate, or, potentially not even mate in some instances. I always used to find that it was just some guy who frequented the club or frequented the store who'd just be like, yeah, I'll turn up and play an Apocalypse game. And then they'd be, look, it's my Warlord Titan. And you're like, oh, God, who invited this guy? Like, it just completely shifts the meta into an entirely mad world. I mean, that's the problem with Apocalypse. It's a lot of work for a lot of tedious, underwhelming experiences. In my experience, I mean, look, if you love Apocalypse, you love Apocalypse. My experience of it is always, it's a chaotic, unenjoyable, tedious game filled with all manner of mad rules that I just can't even begin to comprehend or care about, because it involves stuff that you never have to interact with in a normal game of 40k, and you just find yourself just beating your head off against a brick wall because you're just like, what is going on? Why is this happening? I've not even got to do anything because the enemy team has been procrastinating about what they wanted to do for the last 20 minutes before they even started their movement phase. It's so tedious. I really don't enjoy Apocalypse games.
I think the best thing that's going to come out of this is that you're going to get movement trays, which is amazing.
Yes, plus, woo,
They're doing their own movement trays, which is really useful because then it means that orc players haven't got an excuse to not use them. And then you've got a bunch of cool army box sets that are all being released. So you've got the Orc Cam War one, and you've got the Eldar Wraith army.
Well, I was gonna ask you, and I guess we'll follow up after you've made this sort of point, which your favourite box set is and why. But before we get into that realm, carry on making your point about the pros.
Yeah,
and the
I think everyone's going to really get into it by buying all the accessories. And everyone's going to buy the book. They're going to read it. They're going to watch the cool Becca Scott video and learn how to play the game. They'll play it 2 or 3 times over like 2 months because organising a whole bunch of people to get together on the same weekend.
And those games will be mad tedious because you're all learning the rules in a really cumbersome, awkward game rule set.
And then you won't play the game ever again.
That's how Apocalypse goes, yeah.
Well, I find that's how all these kind of releases go. It's all hyped up. They spend loads of time teaching you to play this game, and then you do it for a month, and then you don't care about it because normal 40k is better. But you get to save a whole bunch of money on buying new models, and you get movement trays. You might go, oh, let's play Apocalypse, and we'll bend the rules slightly to have a normal game of 40k, but with more points.
I think that's always the thing, though, isn't it? Right? I always look at Apocalypse as kind of the mid-season 40k release where they want to just bolster their sales to make up for the fact that they've not got any big releases like this year, I suppose. Right? It's like last year they had Age of Sigmar 2. The year before that they had 40k 8th edition. This year it's like, well, they don't have an Age of Sigmar release of the scale of a whole new rule set. And they don't have a 40k release of the scale of a whole new release. A whole new release. So they'd literally gone along with, let's do an Apocalypse thing, throw a bunch of really, really good value for money box sets in, and then people will just buy them because people are lunatics. I mean, I almost, on the topic of these box sets, I got relatively interested in the idea of buying this Craft Worlds, Spirit Host, Wraithguard box set until I wrote an army list for normal 40k for what I could build with the contents of that box set as a nice sort of fun idea. And then once I'd finished writing the army list, I realised the only thing that I needed to buy that I didn't already own was one more Wraith Lord. And it was like, oh, okay, I don't actually need to get this at all. But I was willing and ready to drop God knows what that thing cost, what 100 quid is what everyone's sort of saying on that box set for no reason other than just mad Games Workshop collector needs of I must buy the new stuff or the new deals when they come out because reasons. But yeah, which of these box sets is your favourite, Joe?
Well, it's very to mention that because you mentioned it already, and it is the Wraith Army. When the contrast paints came out and they came into the shop, and I painted a Wraith Lord, so just one on the shelf. I thought, I've always wanted to paint one of these, so I paint it. I didn't like the contrast paints, by the way, but I was really happy with how I'd used the contrast paints in creating a very nice white Wraith Lord. So I was like, oh, I wouldn't mind doing like 1,000 points add-on to my Dark Eldar as like a fun thing. And then if I go to a doubles event, I've got a cool little nicely painted army I could drag along. And I thought, well, 3 squads of Wraith Guard and 2 extra Wraith Lords is great. And I've already got a Wraithseer at home ready to build. So I thought, why not? I might get that one.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it does represent absurdly good value as well if you're getting, if you're picking that one up. I mean, so I think the contents of that box, not including the as of yet unavailable unless you bought Spirit Host or whatever it was called for the last time they released the Spirit Seer model that they've got in that box. But I think it's like £150 for just all the Wraith constructs. So for the 2 Wraith Lords and the 15 Wraith Guard, that's like 150 quid there. And then if you imagine that Spirits here is what, 25 quid, so it's like 175 quid's worth of stuff for what will probably be £100. And then once you go to one of your favourite discount stores and buy it for 20-30% off, you're really getting a phenomenal deal on these box sets. And I suppose based on that, and the one I actually like the best is the Tau box set. And I'll tell you for why, Joe, why I like the Tau box set, because it's the 8, isn't it?
It's the 8 are awesome. They're an amazing thematic unit within the game of just crazy bananas captains, basically.
I mean, obviously it's lacking Commander Farsight himself, but yeah, I mean, literally this and a Farsight model will pretty much get you the iconic 8 that you will have read about in Chapter Approved and other Games Workshop publications. So yeah, no, I'm a big fan of that Tau Empire box. Of all of the ones I'm looking at, if I'm looking at any of them, that's the only one I might buy, is that one. Because I've always really liked the idea of having the 8.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I feel like the Space Marines drew the short straw. They're like, here, have 30 Intercessors Marines and a captain.
Yeah, I definitely think the weakest one is the Space Marine one. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, obviously, having lots of Intercessors is fine, but it's a really, really unimaginative box set. I mean, when you look at the Orcs box set, where it's all Killer Cans and Dreadnoughts, that's awesome. The Knights box set with the 2 Helverins and the Castellan, that's pretty cool. The Guard one's pretty unimaginative, if I'm honest with you. I mean, okay, cool, it's lots of Leman Russes, but I mean, don't get me wrong, people want lots of Leman Russes, so I do still see the value in it, but I'm less impressed with that as I am with the Tau one, the Adeptus Mechanicus one. Chaos Space Marines as well, actually, is pretty awful. I mean, in terms of 40k competitive, the least competitive box set out of all of them is that Chaos Space Marine box, because that's just bog standard 1 wound Chaos Space Marines and some Chaos Space Marine bikes and a Chaos Lord. I mean, that's a pretty tired old model, that Chaos Lord as well. Yeah, you get some Havocs, which is fine. In fact, no, you don't even get Havocs, do you? There's no Havocs in this box set. It's just those are the heavy weapon dudes. I mean, that's pretty bad. So that Chaos Space Marines, for me, are the weakest in terms of contents, would be my opinion.
Oh, yeah.
So, there you go. And what did you think of the Becca Scott video of explaining how games are played? Did you enjoy this latest, how to play games with Becca Scott video?
I think it's good. I think she always does a good job of conveying it. There was that one. They've tried 2 other guys who have always fallen a bit short in describing the game, but that's her job though, isn't it? Because she's got a D&D YouTube channel, so she's had a lot of practice. Whereas the other guys, I kind of felt like one was a guy who read audiobooks, and the other guy was just a random member of staff they just dragged in.
Yeah. I mean, I always like what she does. I think she does a really good quality, video and production and things. This is a lot better than when she tried to do that Blackstone Fortress Let's Play with Games Workshop employees. I thought that was awful. Not because of her, but just because of the supporting cast of Games Workshop employees. Like, she's trying to keep control of the situation, and it was like a bunch of people who had never really or were overly excited about the fact that they were being recorded for a Let's Play video. So they were all kind of hamming it up way too much. And she's just there like, oh God, this is getting really, really bad. And I know it is. So I'm trying to hold on and keep control. And it's just, so yeah, I think it works best when she's just there playing the game and talking about the mechanics and so on and so forth. And again, it's really great that they did it because it helps break down to some of the barriers to entry. But overall, when it comes to Apocalypse, Joe, yay or nay, Apocalypse, what are you thinking?
Nay. Nay. A big horsey nay.
I heard that box set as well is going to be well pricey. I heard 60 quid for that box.
Oh yeah, for a book and some data cards is not the best news that you want to hear.
No.
Just to learn to play a game. And if you're walking into a Games Workshop store, and then the store manager is like, so you want to start Apocalypse because you're getting into the game, and you're like, yeah, like what do I have to do? So they're like, well, you need to get this box set of the book and the cards. That's like 70, 80 quid. And you're like, okay, and what do I get in that to play with? And they're like, nothing, mate. And they're okay, cool. And you've got to buy an army. You're like, okay, cool. How many points? Oh, it's about 3,000 to 5,000 points. And you're like, well, how many models is that? And you go, see that 100 quid box set of models up on the shelf that says Armageddon? You're like, yeah. 8 of those.
Yeah.
And then you're like, cool. And then someone's like, and they need a board to play it on, and scenery, and a friend.
Yeah, well, multiple friends by all accounts who are also interested in this. I mean, this is the thing. This is a niche of a niche, but the thing is what makes it work is these box sets. That's where the money is. Come tomorrow, or rather later today, or when this stuff goes on pre-order and is available, these box sets are going to sell out super quick. You know, I think the Tau one will go crazy quick. I think the Orc one will probably... the Knight one will just fly. There's the thing. There's so much good stuff here that's just going to absolutely fly out the door. But that's where the business model kicks in. As a game, it's a complete miss for me for the reasons that I've expressed. I've never enjoyed the tedium of trying to get together a game of Apocalypse. It never works. And when you add in a bunch of rules that are so not divorced, but so add-on specific to the regular 40k rules, at least in previous editions, Apocalypse has been fundamentally the same or pretty much the same rules with some added bits. Well, I mean, obviously that's what this is, but when I say added bits, Apocalypse used to just be bigger templates and strength D weapons. Now it's like, oh, here's a small blast and a big blast, and that's what this means. And then you play sort of simultaneous turns and take stuff off, and it's like, it's just, again, it's that thing, it's like, the process of trial and error of learning this game will be so tedious. I'm just not interested because I've been there before when trying to understand these systems where it's just like, let's play a little 1,000 point game to get our heads around how this works. You can't do that with Apocalypse necessarily. I mean, obviously you could, but it kind of takes away from the thing. And you're adding in multiple people and multiple things. It's just, yeah. I mean, for those people who enjoy Apocalypse, they've always enjoyed Apocalypse, and you know they were already sold from this from the outset. For anyone who's buying into Games Workshop's hype and believing that this is going to be a game that you can play in 2 to 3 hours, I absolutely tell you now that is utter rubbish. You ain't playing this game in 2 to 3 hours. Maybe from the point where you start rolling dice, maybe it will be over in 2 to 3 hours, but this will take all day. From transporting it, setting it up, working out what you're doing, getting your team sorted, deciding on anything, it's gonna be, it's the most tedious version of 40k, but it looks great. So that's the other great thing, isn't it? If you've got fully painted armies, but then that's the other Apocalypse issue. When have you ever seen a fully painted game of Apocalypse that wasn't done by Games Workshop Studios?
Never.
I've never seen it.
Never. I've never seen someone. Actually, I said, okay, this is like a half lie. I've never seen someone outside of heresy players put down 5,000 points of an army that's fully painted. Because 40k players will turn up with like 1 or 2 tanks painted, and then 100 Space Marines that are all grey, and then a couple of knights. And it always looks awful. It always looks awful. But if you go to Warhammer World on any given Saturday, there'll be 2 heresy players with like 8,000 points of fully painted legions on the table. And you're like, you guys are mad. But kudos. Yeah,
I mean, that is true. You do see that. But equally, you see people playing Apocalypse with a multitude of different types of painting quality or delivery on things. And the other thing I find as well, which really annoys me a lot of the time with Apocalypse, is it's usually, say, 3 to 4 players aside, 2 to 3, 4 players aside, and everyone just deploys their army in their own little quadrant. So it's always just like, what was the point? Like, why don't you just, it's literally like you've just gone, here's my army, then one over is the next army, then the next army, then the next army. It's not like they deploy it as a mash, a mismatch of different armies that are moving around and being dynamic. It's usually, right, this is my army and I'm playing that guy, basically. And maybe a basilisk will shoot at my stuff from the other side of the board occasionally, but most of the time it's just literally a game of, right, I'm going to deal with the guy in front of me, and the person to the left of me is going to deal to the person to the to the right of me, I guess, or to the left of me as well. Whatever, I can get my directions wrong. But my point is that's just how it is. It's just really, and you spend a lot of time just sort of talking amongst yourself, not knowing what's going on. And then, you inevitably end up being that one player that's got to roll all the dice because everyone's shooting at you because you've been the most aggressive. So the game clogs up even more because it's like, right, mate, well, while he's doing that, let's resolve this combat over here. And then, it just goes off on tangents and goes incredibly wrong. I mean, that, and that isn't fun to me. I just find it's just chaos. I can't deal with it. Apocalypse, for those who love it, good on you. You're not me. and if you don't like the fact that I don't like it, I apologise. But at the end of the day, it's just whatever. But look, I might buy that towel box set and put it on a shelf and forget about it. But other than that, It's all good. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about in the news, and this is a relatively interesting update from last weekend's Warhammer 40,000 Grand Tournament, and that is that in last weekend's Warhammer 40,000 Grand Tournament, it is reported and has been pretty much confirmed that at the very last minute of the Grand Tournament, they introduced bottom floor ruins block line of sight, which for those who play in ITC will know is a very common ITC rule. So this was literally chucked on players in the final moments of setting up for the very first game. So people will have built and prepared army lists on the rules that were supplied, i.e. we're playing normal Warhammer 40,000 with Eternal War missions. But at the very last minute they were told, hey, good news, we're going to use bottom floors of ruins block line of sight. But again, what hasn't been confirmed 100%, but as I understand the situation to be, that was as much of the rule that was communicated. So where ITC has very specific rules for bottom floor ruins and what actually denotes a bottom floor ruin, and you can't make up walls that aren't there and all the other little nuances that ITC have kind of clarified, by all accounts the Warhammer World event team just kind of shouted out on the microphone, this is something we've just added in last minute. You've all played ITC, anyway, don't you? Yeah, whatever, let's make that bold assertion. And I'm really interested to hear what you think about that, Joe. What is your opinion on the last-minute inclusion of a rule that seemingly was poorly explained?
I think it was a terrible idea. I think I'm all happy that it's their tournament, and I'm all happy for them to make this kind of rules change. Like if they want to do that and bring in the ITC, then that's great. But the problem is how they've handled it is terrible, because when you tell someone that the ground floor of all buildings on the table,
ruins specifically,
ruins, and all the buildings of Warhammer World, whenever you play on them, everyone says, "Oh, they're all ruins." Block line of sight, that completely changes the game entirely, and it changes the game from before you even turn up at the tournament. It changes the game in like the list building phase, because units that were terrible, like really terrible, become great, and there's some units that were great that are completely unusable. But then it makes guard armies ridiculously overpowered, because anyone who turned up, that guy who turned up with like 30 mortar teams must have been laughing his head off at the back of the hall when he heard that rule. I think what they should have done is 2 weeks before put out a Warhammer community post saying we're changing the rules, put out an official PDF change on the rules pack and emailed every single person that bought a ticket so that they know that this is happening.
So the rumour mill says that they were not told until literally the Thursday before the tournament was about to take place that they were allowed to add this rule, this stipulation to the Grand Tournament events. Now, again, to be clear, I do not mind the rule. There's nothing wrong with adding that rule, because in Warhammer World events, the terrain is pretty sparse most of the time, and as someone who plays in ITC events from time to time, I am familiar with the rule set that they're referring to. The thing that confuses me and worries me about these kind of decisions is, one, you do it super last minute, and it couldn't have been more last minute. And that is really not acceptable at an event of that magnitude. This is Games Workshop's own official Grand Tournament event that is supposed to essentially illustrate and depict the best in kind of competitive pure 40k. And not to say that ITC isn't a pure adaptation of 40k, but it isn't the rules as written 40k. It's a bunch of bolt-on rules created by gamers who, with all due respect as being a gamer myself, have agendas that they want to have fulfilled. And that's not to suggest that I don't think the guys who wrote the ITC rule pack were not entirely impartial, but at the same time, I don't think the guys who wrote the ITC rule set were entirely impartial, because ultimately they are themselves a group of gamers with an objective to fulfill, and they wanted to make the game perceivably more balanced. But I think that's a very single-minded perspective that didn't come from the mindset of the creators of the rules. And I think when you actually enter into a scenario like this and you implement a rule that isn't a Games Workshop publication, it's something that's supplementary to Games Workshop's publications, and you don't release documentation or give prior warning or do anything of the sort to try and clarify what's supposed to happen, people in a competitive tournament setting will then start to exploit that rule to the nth degree. And I think that's the thing that really concerned me about that. By all means, if you wanted to add it to Heat 2, Heat 3, Heat 4, once the decision had been rendered, great, do it. I've got no issue with the fact that we're going to Heat 2 and we've got to play with this rule set in effect, but clarify what it is, what it does, and why you've done it. And that's what's important here. And it's like that thing where it's literally like, I mean, and again, when I spoke to the winner of the event, he was essentially saying that, he was in favour of it. But again, he is in favour of it because he's used to that sort of ITC setting, and also he understands the rules as they are depicted there. But this is the thing, it's the thing, it's like, did he just assume that it was the ITC rules that he was playing and just allow that to be the situation so he could argue with people? Now, I can clearly draw a line of sight to you there, mate, because there's no wall in front of you. But then, did other players who lost because they're not so familiar with the ITC setting get screwed over because they weren't allowed to shoot at things that were clearly in line of sight, but were on the bottom floor of a, abstract concept that is the ruin? It's one of those things, man. I just think at the end of the day, don't do something like that at the very last minute. Think about it and think about the impact it's going to have, and actually think, you know what? People have built their lists around a very specific rule set. We've kind of got to let them play it the way we told them it was going to be played. And that's the thing. Had I been there, I would have actually more than likely gone and had a word with some of the TOs and been like, guys, what is this? Because, like, I mean, I can play around it, of course I can, but it's that thing where it's like, come on, guys, like, really? You had to wait till the moment we set up to start playing game one to tell us that a big rules change is in effect. And again, the people who argue in favour of it will be like, wow, yeah, but Warhammer World has sparse terrain, and Warhammer World, it didn't really change anything. That's not true, it did. Someone within that event will tell you it changed something significant for them, 100%.
For someone like me who's basically been playtesting for ages, is now in a position where my army does not function how I've been playing it for several months, and that would extremely upset me. So I'd probably go to an official and be like, No, because you've essentially lost me this tournament because you've changed rules and not made me aware of it.
I mean, it's an extreme example, right? An extreme example, but again, it's like turning up to the World Cup finals of football, and the ref saying, "By the way, we're not doing offside rule anymore." It's like, what? When did that come into effect? It's like, yeah, we just don't want to do it anymore. It's like, well, no, hang on, like, what? That can't be right. And it's like, no, yeah, we just decided because the other team doesn't like it when they get called for offside, so we're just going to get rid of it because people have complained over the internet. Or I mean, and this is the thing. I'm not saying. I mean, I feel bad when I say stuff like that because that's not true either. People are vocal about it. I am someone who really, really, really enjoys normal Warhammer 40,000 from the rulebook. And I get it. People who love ITC, and I'm not saying they're wrong to love it, but it's not the rules as written by the guys who write the rules. It's a bunch of bolt-ons and a bunch of extra rules that change the dynamics and change the balance and tilt things to be completely different from what they are in regular 40k. When you watch Frontline Gaming and Reese and Salty Banana and all those guys are going, I don't know why people think Imperial Guard aren't very good. Imperial Guard are one of the best armies in ITC. It's like, yeah, of course they are. Because they've got loads of line of sight ignoring weapons and they've got cheap bodies that can go everywhere and not be harassed because you can't draw line of sight to them. It's like, yeah, in ITC, Imperial Guard are amazing. But in 40k, they're sort of balanced. I mean, don't get me wrong, if anything in 40k, they're not very good overall. And I always found it amusing when you go to events and people just turn up with their optimized ITC lists and play in regular 40k and go, oh, yeah, I can get shot, can't I? Oh, all of a sudden my army's not so broken. And it's like, yeah, that's how it should be. But it's like, it's that thing, man. Again, with the risk of sounding like I'm ranting and I'm really anti-ITC, I'm in favour of however everyone wants to play the hobby. The crux of the issue here is you've done it at the last minute, and that really isn't on. So hopefully Games Workshop actually release some kind of comprehensive information out to the community telling us that they're actually introducing this rule for all future events, because I personally haven't received any information or updates about Grand Tournament Heat 2 as of this recording. So, let's wait and see what they do, I suppose.
Yeah, we can only hope that they actually do something about it. And that because at the moment, the internet has now taken this information and passed it around, and now people are coming to the assumption that this is now the future of Warhammer 40k GT tournaments and how it's going to work. So that's how they're going to practice. That's how they're going to write their lists. And Games Workshop aren't going to say anything against it. So if we all turn up at GT Heat 2 and Games Workshop are like, oh, we're not doing that rule anymore because we don't think it works, then the people are just going to go absolutely mental.
Well, like I say, it's the madness of it all. It's like, because that's the situation you're in. Who knows what they're going to add next time you turn up to a grand tournament? They're going to go, oh, by the way, we're capping minuses to hit to -1. And then all of a sudden, like, there's so many, like, Eldari players that have been relying on, like, -2s and so on, or, all sorts of other minus to hit buffs for, like, Nurgle armies and other things, or the new Slanesh army mechanics that are in effect. All these guys are going to be like, I'm sorry, what? Like, my entire army is built and pointed to being able to get to as much as, say, -4. And that's a big part of my game strategy. That's why I'm taking these units and da-da-da. Yeah, but we just decided at the last minute that we're just going to cap it at -2 because it's fairer, isn't it? I was like, well, not really, because had you told me sooner, I wouldn't have done it, would I? I would have taken better, more optimized units that don't benefit from this particular, you could call it an exploit, but this particular rule set. And that's the frustration of this situation. It's like, that's what they're doing. They're literally just going, oh yeah, we've decided that no model has more than 1 wound for this tournament. It's like, hang on, like, what? Like, where is all this coming from? It's like, where do you draw the line? And when is it appropriate? And if Games Workshop want to seriously, my frustration with the Grand Tournament events, and I cannot be a bigger advocate for them because I do really love them, but on the other hand, there's always something that goes a little bit wrong with them every year. There's always something that's like, come on, guys, like, your point system was a bit janky for the last couple of years. now you're in a situation where you've kind of ironed it out, so the guy who wins all 5 games is the only person who can realistically win the whole event, which is the right decision, but at the same time, you're just throwing rules into things without any forethought. It's like there are independent tournament organisers who would get their heads bitten off for doing what Games Workshop did, but yet seemingly Warhammer World events can just be like, whatever, and that isn't right. It's like you got to if you want to host these events and you want to be a kind of standard bearer for the competitive community, you got to do things properly, and that isn't doing things properly, in my opinion. And again, that's it really. That's the crux of the matter. Please, for the love of God, stop adding rules at the last minute, because that's not good for the players. It's not good for your events, and it's not good for the hobby.
Yeah, but on a plus note, something that I've recently been aware of, having been cruising the internet, is that in the new General's Handbook for Age of Sigmar, they have put in official tournament rules and etiquette and stuff in it.
Yeah, the code of conduct. Yeah.
Yeah, the code of conduct, which is brilliant. So, but all you can hope now, and they did the tournament rules pack for Kill Team, which is very cool. So my hope is that we're going to see an official Games Workshop tournament booklet released, like in Kill Team, where you're going to get a box with tape measures, rulers, data cards, stuff like that, but a pamphlet or a magazine or a book or whatever that literally lays out how to run a tournament, what rules are in effect, how to put down house ruling, and then how to treat people who cheat, stuff like that. So hopefully this could be on the horizon, because it's happened twice now. Hopefully it will happen a third time for us 40k players.
I sincerely hope so, mate. But anyway, there we go. That was the news. Let's move on now with the traditional transitional noise. Woo! Hello everyone, welcome to this segment of the podcast where we talk about movies and things. More specifically because the latest of the Astartes films, or short films I suppose I should call it, came out today, the 13th of June 2019. Episode 4 of Astartes came out, which was an utterly fantastic addition to the hopefully long-running series of fabulous Space Marine themed films. What was your opinion of it, lads? Did we enjoy Astartes episode 4? Joe?
If I'm telling you honest, I haven't watched it yet.
Fantastic. It's only a critical part of this entire segment, Joe, don't worry. The entire kind of,
I've watched
reason...
the other ones, and they're brilliant.
Well, there you go. So you can only assume that this episode 4 would be as good, right?
I would assume they only gets better.
Well, indeed. Well, I'll tell you what, Joe, what we're going to do is we're just going to pause for a moment while you watch this and come right back.
Oh, for God's sake.
2 hours later.
So there we go, Joe. Now that you watched it, what is your opinion of the lovely new Astartes episode 4?
It was flipping excellent.
There you go.
It's very violent, which you would hope for from a Space Marine film. All 2 minutes of it, and for a free release, as it were, it's incredibly detailed. You can see the amount of love and work that goes into it.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, because Space Marines in themselves aren't massively detailed, so the time they're saving on scaling those and doing all the shading, they can put a lot of hard work into the bad guys and the special effects, and that really shows.
Phil, did you enjoy the lovely sights and sounds of Astartes episode 4?
I did indeed. It is by far the best fan 40k video there is out there. I would say maybe it's up there with the Inquisitor one, because that was fantastic, but that project's now dead in the water. So this one is keeping the torch going for decent 40k content made by fans.
There's a Horus Heresy series as well that a guy's been working on that's pretty incredible.
Yeah, there was a few bits in that which were a bit funny. where there was like sort of modern day cars in the backdrop, and he reused one animation of a woman running while carrying a baby an awful lot in that video.
Yeah, but you know what? Who's to say that a modern car couldn't have ended up somewhere within the 30k universe? Just because it's, you know, a current day vehicle doesn't mean it couldn't mysteriously somehow have ended up there.
Yeah, true. It just sort of broke my immersion, but the rest of it was pretty fantastic, and I think he got the sense of the sort of speed and brutality of the Space Marines down really well, especially when it's like Astartes v Astartes. I thought that was pretty good in those videos.
Yeah.
And this guy who's doing the Astartes videos has got that down as well, actually, like them running down the corridors and you know, moving pretty quickly. It's all very good, and you see that in this latest video as well, so that's cool.
I think the thing I really enjoy about the Astartes movies is beyond, obviously, the quality of the production, because, you know, this guy is obviously making a really, really high quality of animation and film. It's more about the way that he's chosen to kind of portray the Space Marine or the Astartes as a very clinical, very meticulous, very efficient killing machine, which I think is really great. I think all too often when it comes to people trying to portray Space Marines in films, they try and focus, or in fan films anyway, they focus a lot on the characters being kind of, you know, speaking parts and talking more and trying to understand their motivations. And obviously within the context of like Horus Heresy, that does work, but I think within the 40k universe, you know, just seeing the efficiency and the way that a Space Marine goes to battle and, you know, is so kind of drilled and practiced in the art of, you know, collaborating with his fellow Astartes and terrorizing and taking apart their opposition is just really incredible. It just goes away towards showcasing the absolute awesomeness of Space Marines without having any dialogue or any kind of expedition. I can't even say today, but you know what I mean. Exposition. Thank you. You know, it's fantastic, and I think, you know, honestly, yeah, I think if you're going to portray Space Marines in a film, I think that's really one of the best ways you could possibly do it. Which kind of led us on to this bizarre notion of, obviously we're seeing a great deal of fan movies within the Warhammer 40,000 hobby. Started obviously with the incredible work of that gentleman that created that Inquisitor thing, but, you know, lots and lots of people have been doing lots and lots of things for years and years. There was even a Games Workshop commissioned Inquisitor film made somewhere in the 90s, I believe, featuring live action and all sorts of things. Have either of you gents seen that one?
I haven't. Wasn't John Hurt in it though?
It could well have been. I actually don't know now. Now you're asking for actors' names, possibly.
There was quite a few. I don't remember there being ever one that was live action that was a sort of standalone one. There was an awful lot of like video cutscenes from computer games. So they did like an epic game that had a ton
Final Liberation.
Yes, so that one had a load of cutscenes, and you can pretty much watch all of them in one go on YouTube as a mini video or mini film almost. Not that it would make a huge amount of sense. And then they did, I remember when I went to Games Day back as a kid, so we're talking, I don't know, 1998, something like that, or maybe even earlier, and it was when they first did the sort of Gene Stealer Cult versus Deathwing, I think, the trailer, and I think they did another one with like orcs and maybe Chaos Marines and regular Marines. I remember when they first appeared, and that sort of blew my mind as like the height of sort of special effects back in those days.
Indeed. Well, I can reassure everyone there was a 1996 short film called Inquisitor. It's a 30-minute long Warhammer 40,000 movie that was commissioned and created by Games Workshop. So there you go. That is a real thing that already exists.
Is it available on YouTube?
It is. I will put it into the show notes, as it were. I can't say for certain whether or not this is an official source. In fact, I'm 100% sure it's not an official source. But then, at the same time, it's sort of far enough in the past now that there's probably no real copyright on it. So I imagine people probably aren't overly worried about those sort of things. But yeah, we'll share that with you guys after we finish recording this, I guess, because if we stopped for half an hour to let you watch it, that might be a bit ridiculous. Joe stopping for a few minutes to watch Astartes sort of made sense, but half an hour odd to watch that probably doesn't make too much sense. But nonetheless, so yes, there was live action films and things like that have happened, but ultimately, we got to thinking, what would we want to see brought to life on the big screen or in, a TV series format a la Game of Thrones or something of that nature, if, they were to ever explore doing a more kind of in-depth 40k universe film franchise thingy. So that's really what we're going to talk about now, I guess. Unless anyone has any other comments to make on the Astartes or other Games Workshop related film projects. Joe?
Well, there is a official one coming down the line, which is all about Blood Angels. So that's by the guys that did the Hell's Reach YouTube series, which I think even had at a later point Dan Abnett came on to help them with. Maybe I'm thinking about the Inquisitor prologue that was going to have Dan Abnett in, and the Hell's Reach one. Oh no, Darren. Baron, I can never pronounce his name.
Aaron Dempsey Bowden.
Yeah, him. So he came onto the Inquisitor prologue one and did some writing for it, but then that project got canned. And then I think the Hell's Reach one is based on, is it his work or Dan Abnett's work already? So
it's not a Dan Abnett story, no, but it was from the Space Marines battle novel series, and the book Hell's Reach, about Grimaldus as he, fights to save Hell's Reach from the invading orcs upon Armageddon, which is quite an incredible book within that series. It's all about how Grimaldus essentially, defends everything and fights to the end and so on and so forth.
It is by Aaron Dempsey Bowden, though, Hell's Reach.
Ah, that makes sense. Well, yes.
Right, so that's what I was thinking of. Yeah, so I presume they just lifted the dialogue from that.
They went even further. They actually lifted a lot of the audio from the audiobook. So they used the voice of Grimaldus from the audiobook. They did a few bits of extra production. So there was the Princeps of the Warlord class Titan, or maybe it was some other type of Titan, but it was a massive Titan. I can't remember which variant it might have been now. But the point is that they did actually take the time to revoice certain parts, but Grimaldus was played by the gent who does the audiobook for Hell's Reach, as are various other characters.
That's good to know.
Indeed. But yeah, no, I mean, I actually really enjoyed the Hell's Reach series that fella put together. It sounds really, really unfair to say that it's one of the weakest of all of the, animated short features out there, but I think it's probably fair to say that it is versus some of the incredible competition. That's not to say that I think, given some additional funding and given opportunities by Games Workshop to do something original and exciting, that they won't do an excellent job. I just think, ultimately, when you see the incredible work that's being done by like the guys who do the Astartes thing, maybe, just maybe, there could have been some better people to have put the 40k IP in the hands of, but we will never know until we do, and when we do, hopefully we'll all be wrong and it will be the greatest thing ever.
Yeah, I really struggled with the Hell's Reach one because of the art style, and it's done in a very kind of, it's like it's hand-drawn in a very sketchy fashion, which is it's just a filter that's applied to, in a way, it sort of hides the sins of the not having to texture or do much with the actual models themselves, and it's just stylized.
Yeah, I think it was also
done. Cool, but I really struggled with, I just wasn't a fan of that art style.
I think it was also done, and then again, maybe this is incredibly presumptuous of me, but it's fair to assume, and I certainly do, at least in the initial ones that he did, that he was taking character models from video game franchises. So I think most of the character models in that series were lifted from the Space Marine game from Relic. Yeah, well, I think maybe he made a unique mask for Grimaldus, but I don't think so. I think it's literally the character model for one of the chaplain skins in the game, because I do believe a chaplain appears at some point in the Space Marine game, or was available as a multiplayer skin. It's definitely, you can see lots of elements from the Relic games and their character models. So I
mean,
think,
if that gives him more time to concentrate on the actual animation and character modeling, not necessarily making the models, but like just animating them and actually putting together something. Because his stuff is like really long. It's pretty feature length in comparison to everything else, which is much shorter. So I guess that's the compromise. It's cutting corners in terms of making models and texturing them and stuff, and then in fact actually concentrating on the filming side of it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But yeah, anyway, look, I mean, you know, again, genuinely, I did really enjoy the Hell's Reach thing. I think, as Phil said, the animation does sort of flip-flop from episode to episode, so it started out in more of a kind of black and white style, then he started introducing colour, but again, that's just the nature of the process that he kind of went on and what he did, and it's fair to say that the later episodes were of a very, very high quality benchmark, and I think it's going to be interesting to see what he does when it comes around to that. But anyway, moving on to the topic of what we might like to see be done in the Warhammer 40,000 universe within movies. Phil, Joe, have you had much of a chance to think about the sorts of things you'd like to see? I suppose the way we'll do this, we'll just come up with one suggestion each. So, Joe, you sounded keen to give your opinions. What might you like?
Well, for like a film, a one-off film, if you're going to like introduce someone to the world of Warhammer, I've actually recently been listening to The Wicked and the Damned audiobook, which is the Warhammer horror series.
Ooh, is that good?
It's really, really good. And the film starts off with three people meeting in a graveyard. It's basically like a graveyard planet, and basically no one lives on it. It's just where the Imperium sends its dead to be buried. And basically they're three complete strangers, and then each one of them tells their story as to why or how they've come to be on that planet. And then each of the stories is very different. So if you want to make a film, it has some cool bits. So there's a commissar, and his story is all about him fighting in the trenches against like an unknown foe. So the whole time they're fighting an enemy, but they can't see them. So that's really cool, because you then get to see in a film, you get to see like the whole trench warfare guard aspect of things. The second one is a woman who's a high-ranking officer on a ship, and it's all about the backstabbing and the internal politics of a regiment on a long-distance travel. And then the third one is a priest who's kind of lost his faith, and that one's more, and that's all set on a space station which is designed specifically for breaking down ships. And that's got a very cool aliens aspect to it, on the case of it's a small crew of people versus one incredibly strong bad guy. And it all revolves around chaos, and there's a very strong horror theme to it, which is very 40k. And it's and from a film aspect, you get to introduce people to three very different aspects of the Warhammer universe, but also gets to show you how the normal people live at the same time. Because like when you go to watch a film at the cinema, you don't want to just watch Space Marines running around gunning people down, because that won't appeal to everyone. But if you can go and see a film where, yes, it's got war, it's got lots of fighting, there's a horror aspect, there's a political side of things, and it's all a very human element which viewers can relate to. So yeah, that's my idea.
It's an interesting point, though, that you raised, though, Joe. Is I think, and again, I think it's one of the areas where that Ultramarine movie really fell down. Is that having a movie exclusively about like superhuman warrior monks that kind of view humanity as, well, through a very kind of very specific filter, you know, they've ascended beyond humanity and they have a degree of indifference towards it, which I suppose has always been one of the great jokes of the Warhammer 40,000 universe, that humanity's greatest saviour is also not actually humans at all, which is kind of interesting in and of itself. But I think that's one of the weird things, isn't it, with Warhammer 40,000, one of the greatest pieces of its IP, if not the greatest piece of IP within all of Warhammer 40,000, is the Space Marine. But bizarrely, the Space Marine is probably one of the most complicated things to do right and make an engaging movie out of, I would imagine.
Yeah. And if you do all Space Marines, the film's just going to be all CGI. If you want to use human actors, you have to rely very heavily on the human aspect of things. But you want to be able to differentiate it from other sci-fi stuff. So I don't want to give too much of the story away, but obviously it's all based around chaos. So chaos uses a lot of human aspects. But then it works on you can look at it as a way of these people in the future still suffer from the same things that we do, like jealousy, hatred, lust, all that kind of stuff. But then also they're all struggling with the same kind of questions that we do, of do gods exist, and what am I going to do with my future, kind of thing. It's very difficult to explain.
Oh no, I think it makes sense. I think it makes sense, though, right? To have a story told from the perspective, retrospective of characters would definitely be interesting, I suppose. Having them sort of sat around. I suppose that's the thing, though, isn't it? If you have three separate topics rolled into one, I mean, if you could pick any one of those three subject matters, which one would you think would be the most interesting?
It's difficult because, I think out of all of them, the last one about the preacher who's questioning his faith was trying to deal with the threat of chaos, tried to kill him the whole time. So you can do it in a not the same as, but in a very similar way to the original Aliens film. So the crew's dealing with their own stuff, their own lives, but in the meantime they're being stalked by this thing that's going to just murder them all. Because it's so isolated in space, it gives you a small snippet into the universe, but without complicating it too much. It would be a good introduction movie. So if you went and saw that, and then you went and saw another Warhammer film, something like Gaunt's Ghosts or whatever, you'll then understand the phrases that they use, or they'll be concrete is now I don't know, they call it ferrocrete or something like that, or rockcrete, or the plastics and how they describe food, and they'll know what a las gun is, stuff like that.
No, that makes sense. That makes total sense. Phil, what would you like to see immortalized in film within Warhammer 40,000?
I think you would have to focus more on the human aspects, a bit like what you guys have been saying. I don't really think Space Marines work really well, even just in a sense of scale. Space Marines are massive. It's if you've ever seen any of the Horus Heresy artwork, and it's got Space Marines, or especially even the Primarchs, stood next to humans that literally go up to their waist. It's it just looks stupid, and it's not very realistic at all. It's so what? Space Marines, does every door in Warhammer 40k need to be twice as big so a Space Marine can go through it? Or literally, that's what a hive would have to do, or Space Marines just couldn't go in there because they couldn't fit through any doors. And that's why everything's so grand and massive. So I just think Space Marines don't really work very well. The only time I've seen it work well, and this is my pick basically, is Vicarian Throne. So that's an Inquisitor novel, not from the Eisenhorn trilogy. It's a completely separate thing, which is what makes it slightly better, because I think it's better written, and it's not. I mean, it probably will be part of a trilogy at some point, but it's very much a standalone story in its own right that's neatly tied up. The Eisenhorn stuff would be fantastic as, say, like a Netflix series or Game of Thrones. Obviously, HBO does the sort of best show, so if anyone was going to do it, I think I'd rather it be them. Because that's much more of a long-running thing with lots of threads and characters. Because obviously it starts off with Eisenhorn, and then it goes on to... oh God, I've completely forgotten what his name is. The other Inquisitor, Ravener. Yeah, and then it will go on to I'm trying to think what her name is now as well. It begins with B. The psychic null lady.
Destiny Bellaquin.
Bellaquin,
Like
yeah, that's it. Yeah. So that's like 3 trilogies of 3, but then actually he then did Magos, so that makes it 4 books in the Eisenhorn trilogy. So overall, as an overarching story, that would be great as a TV show. For a movie, I think the Vault of Terror is like the series title, but Carrion Throne follows a guy on the throne world, so it's all set on Terror, which I think in a way could be good, because it actually is then relatable to people watching it, like, oh, this is what Earth has now become. But obviously that in itself is sort of so far removed to what most 40k is. I mean, it's still got that kind of grim, dark aspect, and there's lots of, horrible hives and, poverty. But you also see the grandiose scale of, like, not quite, you don't see the throne room, but you see, I think you see the gates of terror, I think it's called, where the 2 titans are standing. And it's all about intrigue and cults rising up, but they do a really fantastic moment where, and it's not really giving spoilers away because it's on the cover of the book, but they get chased down by this unstoppable thing, and all the picked feeds can't pick it up because it's just a blur because it's so quick. And it's sort of, the chapter ends as it cuts away where the Inquisitor, and this is an Inquisitor, he sort of says something like, he's sort of like, oh my God, we're done for, in the polite term, or like, oh my God, like, that's it. And it basically turns out to be a Custodes who's just absolutely brutal. And because it's only one of them, you can really see the sort of comparison of how superhuman he is in comparison to the humans. And I think doing Marines in that context works really well. When you have a whole regiment of them, like, none of them are special, but if you have just one of them and everybody's like in absolute awe of it, then it gives you that kind of sense of purpose and scale that I think they need to make them work. But the majority of the dialogue is all still based around humans doing their thing, and there's a nice sort of film noir storyline going through it, because ultimately that's what I like about the Inquisitors in general. Like, they're basically detectives, and all the novels are detective stories, and I think that works really well. And I think the Black Library books are doing a good job of showcasing that any genre can work within 40k, such as, you've got kids books, you've got the new horror series, and as Joe said, you've got Gaunt's Ghosts, which would be another good one, because that's effectively like a war film. So I think anything that works from the human aspects, I think will do the best. But I think the Inquisitors give you that kind of Blade Runner darkness and showcases sort of the best and worst of humanity. I think that's a really good angle to come at it. I think war movies can work, but I think they're almost like too abstract. They would have to be done in a kind of Imperial Guard regiment for it to be relatable, I think.
No, that makes sense. I think if I was to pick one aspect of telling the Marine story, I'd probably focus on their ascension or their selection, I suppose. So, obviously, as us, as 40k fans know, you know, a Space Marine isn't born a Space Marine. He's, you know, created, as it were, and it's created from the raw material of, you know, a young human male, and you know, the journey that those boys go on to be selected to become Space Marines, as far as I'm aware, could definitely, you know, offer some really interesting and very exciting kind of narrative. You know, almost kind of like Take On Me or whatever it was. The not Take On Me. The
The song.
No, not the song, but there was no. Was it Take On Me? It was the story. There was a film. Now I'm going to get all confused. It was a film about 4 kids going off to find a dead body.
No, Stand By Me.
Stand By Me, Take On Me, dear God. Thank you. I knew I was just a slight bit off. But yeah, like Stand By Me, I suppose, where like kids go off and, you know, go on an adventure. The same kind of thing is true, but then probably dialed up to 11 with the sheer level of horror and danger that exists within the 41st millennia. So the idea of having like a kid going off to be selected to become an Astartes, and that works to what you were saying as well, though, Phil, because, you know, then at the point of selection, you have to assume that a Marine would come down from the heavens to, you know, cast judgment upon some of the selected initiates, as it were, and seeing that, you know, person's worldview change from their initial humble beginnings to then, you know, ascending into the ranks of, or, you know, going through the process of being reborn as a Space Marine. And I don't think you necessarily need to take it to that conclusion where you get all the way to them waking up and being like, well, I'm a Space Marine now, but, you know, just to the point at the end of the selection process. And I think that would be a really interesting potential movie in terms of talking about Marines. So I think that could be quite cool. Personally, though, sorry, Joe, was that you, Joe?
I was going to say, yeah. So what you've done there is you've described the Dante book.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So the Dante book starts off with him as a child in his little caravan with his salt farming dad and mum, and it follows his journey of survival across Baal. But all the initiates have to do, they have to journey across Baal through the deserts on their own, fighting off like the giant sand scorpions, and they've got this stuff called thirst water, which like it looks like water, but the moment you drink it, your entire body gets dried out and you turn into a giant husk of a person.
Oh wow!
And then it goes like they have to get something called angel's wings, which are these like it's basically a glider rucksack. They have to climb, have to journey up to this giant mountain and literally just leap off it and have the air currents carry them to like Baal Primus, like the main city.
Oh yeah.
But it's like a journey that takes like 4 hours. You have to stay on these heat currents the whole time they're flying. These giant vulture birds are trying to eat them.
Well, it sounds fantastic.
Yeah. And then obviously he eventually gets to the Primus thing, and he gets selected, and then part of it then goes on to his story of being a scout. So there's a whole section of him being a scout versus orcs.
Okay.
And then obviously the film can continue through that to the point where he then does become an assault marine kind of thing, which is a cool idea.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think you need any of the Marine stuff. I just think you need the journey. But bizarrely, that was just more talking expansion to Phil's thing. One of the things I'd really like to see is some of the more kind of like weird alien stuff within the universe. And one of the sequences that I always used to think could be like super cool for like a short film anyway, you know, maybe not like a proper full motion picture, but more a like a half an hour super artsy fartsy animated short would be like the
Animatrix. Do you remember that?
I do remember the Animatrix, yeah, absolutely. Or like the robots, zombies, and something else on Netflix series. I've forgotten what it's called now, but it's brilliant. They had an episode about yogurt becoming sentient.
Love Love, Death and Robots.
That's it. Yeah, fantastic series. But yeah, something like that. I'd really like to see someone try and tackle the story of or rather the process of the birth of an avatar, or rather the awakening of the avatar. So there was a really great thing in one of the early Elder books that I read that I think is still present in the lore now, but it was the process of, selecting, I think they were called the Phoenix King or whatever, and the Phoenix King would be this elder warrior that was selected to, birth the avatar. So this, cherished warrior of the craft world would, take on the duty of becoming the avatar, and would essentially be stripped down to, nothing but covered with, sacred runes and stuff, and do this, incredible prayer of, worship and all this other stuff, and then walk into the furnace that essentially bursts the avatar. And I've always really found the idea of that really kind of evocative and interesting, because I always imagined that you could do really interesting things with that, because you could have like flashbacks of his former glories, and show lots of interesting narrative pieces as he's defended the craft world against invaders, and have flashbacks to fighting against Tyranids, or flashbacks to potentially times even before the heresy, witnessing the birth of mankind, all these kind of incredible kind of evocative things that you could kind of put in that warrior's past, and then show him making that ultimate sacrifice and becoming the Avatar of Cain. Because I love the Avatar of Cain as a piece of lore within Elder. It really irks me in a way that I can't bring myself to be less of a competitive player and run one in my army, because I really love what the Avatar represents. But I'm always a bit too much of a tryhard, and I can never quite get around to just going, I'll take this objectively not that good character that's not going to really help me win too many games. But yeah, I love the idea of that. I think something like that could be super cool. And I think of all the races that are within 40k that aren't just the humans, I think the Eldar are probably one of the best pieces of lore to potentially look at. Not so much the Drakari side of things, because I imagine if you started trying to go to the Dark City of Kamaramarath, or whatever it's called. How do you pronounce it, Joe?
Komarag, I think.
Something like that. But you start going to there, and then it starts to get probably a bit too mad. But yeah, I think something like that might be quite cool, just to throw in something different. But if I was going to do Space Marines, I'd do the whole, what seemingly is the book they've done about Dante, or I would do a nice backstory on the ascension of like the birth of an Avatar, because I quite like that, like the idea of starting at the end, I guess, of this warrior's life, and doing a whole kind of I was there at the birth of humanity, and I watched you climb from the primordial soup, and all the usual kind of self-obsessed nonsense that the Elder like to say. But yeah, that's me. I don't know. I'd like to see some Elder stuff, because I love me Elder. Come on now, more Elder films. Move away from the Imperium. Do some Elder stuff. It'd be wicked.
I'm down with that.
There you go.
I imagine it'd be quite good to see the Horus Heresy done in some fashion. But again, I imagine that could only really be done as a TV series. But the overall arcing story, I think, is pretty good. It's just how would you do it justice?
The problem is with the Horus Heresy series is the most... If you wanted to talk practically, the only real way you could ever imagine them doing it is if they did it as an animation. And then the two things are really kind of counterproductive, because you'd want to try and skew it older, and you'd want to try and have it appeal to an older audience, because all the content of the Horus Heresy is utterly horrific. But then at the same time, because it's animated, it's always going to have a natural barrier to entry. And I think that's the thing. One of the things I think as 40k or Games Workshop fans that we kind of know and hasn't yet, I guess, been discovered by the mainstream is there's some absolutely amazing storytelling within Warhammer. It's incredible, the depth of the universe that they've created. And I think one of these days someone's going to find a way of tapping into that and turning it into a hit show, because you know, it's a very, very, very compelling universe for so many reasons. So, but yeah, could I don't imagine they could ever make it work as a live action, because just the amount of money it would cost them to make that work. It must be maddening to even think about how you would achieve that.
No, I totally agree with you there.
Yeah. But we'll see. You never know. It could happen. Games Workshop are doing licensing deals all the time. So before long, we may well be seeing a Warhammer 40,000 movie. And, you know, hopefully whoever makes that maybe listened to this podcast and thought, oh, yeah, maybe one of those ideas will do. Let's make that happen. So if you are a Hollywood director, first of all, thank you for listening to our podcast. It's very kind of you. Not that it's less kind for anyone else to be listening to the podcast. Everyone listening to this podcast is exceptionally kind. Thank you. However, in this particular instance, singling out Hollywood director, if you are listening to this, you know, feel free to steal any of these ideas, because seemingly, without even realising it, I stole them from Games Workshop anyway, or at least my one, and Joe's all directly referenced books, as did Phil's, so, you know, get to it, mate. Alright, I reckon that pretty much concludes this segment. Now, let us move on to whatever comes next.
Fingers on buzzers, everyone, because it's time for the end of the show quiz.
Hello and welcome back to the Lookout Sir 40k podcast end of podcast quiz. We've been off for a couple of weeks doing this due to scheduling conflicts, but we're back and we're all very excited, aren't we, guys?
Way, I'm so excited. The end of the show or podcast quiz, depending on what we're calling it.
So excited. I'm going to put my paintbrush down.
There you go. There you are.
Taking it seriously for a change.
Yeah. Oh, the shade.
Well, you're the only one who hasn't won it yet, Joe.
It's funny you'd mentioned paints, Joe. That could be useful for this week's quiz.
Oh, don't ask me names of paints. They're just red, blue, and yellow.
Well, we'll soon discover if that is a question, I'm sure.
Yeah, so this week's quiz is themed around, is timely, because the contrast has arrived to the world, as it were. So I have a series of questions based around paints.
Yeah.
And the system and what we have available. So, are you guys all ready?
Well, indeed, yes, absolutely.
Ready?
Prepared.
We've tested the buzzers.
We have.
We all have the various buzzers. So you know the format, there are going to be 4 introductory questions before we go into the real meat of the quiz, which will either be really exciting for everybody or a massive disappointment. So we'll see what happens. But I'm very excited for this.
I can tell.
I hope you too.
Are we going to discover what everyone's buzzers sounds like this week?
We can do that. Let's hear the buzzers, because it's a staple of the quiz. Let's start with Joe. Joe, let's ring your buzzer.
Pressing the button now.
Murdering. I'll go out murdering, and then I'll come home, and I'll have beans on toast.
Wow,
I can only imagine what that will be. Sorry, I crashed your vocals there. You carry on.
I'm only terrified of what Dan's chosen for me.
Well, I keep loving the goat sound that you made that one time, so I kind of feel that should always come back. But I'll see if I can find some other fantastic sound bites.
Am I like the Alan Davis of QI?
No.
Yeah, basically, I think that's a good way of putting it.
Oh, great.
I don't. I don't know who would be the other two, but you do a good Alan Davies. Take it as a compliment. This could be your week to shine, Joe. If anything, it should be you. I feel this should be a good round for you.
There you go.
But I've been wrong many times before. Okay. Next up, Phil. Let's hear your buzzer.
It is.
You going for the same one again, Phil?
Maybe not.
maybe not. It's almost like we don't know yet what the buzzers are. It's a
good job we don't do this live.
I know.
Can we make it that music that Phil hates?
Yes. Yes, that's what it's going to be. It's going to be the music Phil hates.
Maybe I just won't ever press my buzzer then.
Well, there you go.
There you go, Joe. It's looking good for you.
Yeah.
Lastly, Dan, what's your buzzer this week?
Well, this week's obscure cartoon reference goes as... Lit Love! I hate Lit Love! Yeah! There you go. No one's going to be overly thrilled by that because they won't know where it's from. And,
Thundercats, though, right?
No. Well, maybe I could use the Hammerhand one from Thundercats, maybe.
Or just do Snarf.
Could do Snarf, yeah, absolutely. I like to go even more obscure than that, though. You got to go to like some weird place. I was sort of thinking I might go with Belly Button World from Ren and Stimpy. It's the episode where Stimpy, crawls into his own belly button.
As he does.
As he does. There you go. But we'll see.
I
And he
can't
lives-
believe children actually watch that. That's
I know.
like the most terrifying TV program ever.
Well, it's brilliant as well because when it happens, it just turns him into like a little like peanut because he's obviously crawled inside his belly button. So all that remains is like this little, little sweetie type belly button piece, and he hangs out with some lint that's inside his belly button. So the lint, who turns out to be an abusive husband. It's quite brilliant. Anyway, there you go.
We watched some interesting stuff as children, didn't we?
Well, exactly.
Okay, let us now begin the.
Have you locked me out, Richie?
He's locked us all out.
I've locked it so no one else can join or leave.
Ah, look at that, locked.
I believe that's what it means when it says toggle lock. It's the new feature on Buzz-In Live.
No, I don't think you can actually press the.
Try your buzzers.
It's
No,
locked. He's
it
locked
doesn't
us
work.
out.
It's
Oh,
not-
okay. That's what. Okay, it doesn't do what. Very unintuitive then, Buzz-In. I assume that meant no one else could join. It just meant no one else could. Okay, do you want to try your buzzers again? Just make sure you'll work.
We're all good.
Yeah, that's better now.
There we go. You'll work.
Damn
okay,
you,
reset the
Buzzing
buzzers.
Live.
Okay, let us now begin the Citadel color paint themed issue. It's not issue. Week of the Lookout Sir podcast quiz. Question number 1. How many paints are there in the new contrast range? First buzz in is Dan. How many are you going for?
42.
Wrong. You're wrong.
Oh.
Next is Phil.
34.
It is 34.
Oh! Someone's got Warhammer Community open on his page, hasn't he?
Lies.
Name them all, Phil. Name them.
Question 2. Question 2. This does involve naming.
Oh, okay.
So for question 2, can you tell me the names of the 2 new contrast undercoats? Phil has buzzed in.
I'll go out
Corax,
murdering.
white and grey.
No, you're wrong.
What? No.
Sorry, Phil. You're too confident.
Oh.
Next, we have Joe.
It's Wraithbone and oh god, white. No, I want to say White Scar, but I don't think it is.
It's not White Scar. Dan, do you want to buzz in and have a go? Or you're
I'll
not,
have a go.
You're not having to Google it.
No, I'm not Googling it. I'm not Googling it. Yeah, one is Wraith Seer or Wraith Bone. Wraith something. Which is the... and
the
then, is it Grey Seer and Wraith Bone?
It is Grey Seer and Wraith Bone.
Yes!
No.
It's Dan.
God, there you go. Thank you for letting me sort of think that out loud throughout the process. But there we go. Woo.
The others had the opportunity. They just thought it'd be a white. They're both. Neither of them are actually whites. They're both off whites.
Well, that's true. That's true.
Okay.
Not Korax white, though. Korax
Oh,
white is very
definitely
white.
not. Okay, as part of the Contrast marketing PR campaign.
Can you reset the buzzers, please?
Set those buzzers.
Oh, for what? Yes, thank you for pointing that out. It wouldn't be the Warhammer. It wouldn't be the quiz if I wasn't told to reset the buzzers a couple of times during it.
You just get so excited about the
I
questions.
do get
that's
really
what it is.
excited.
You just don't know what
I'm
to do.
very excited about this one. Okay, well, not this particular question, but this. I'm excited about the bit that comes later.
Okay. Well,
Okay, as part of the marketing for the new contrast paints, Games Workshop has started using 2 new terms to describe the level of painting a model has received. Can you name these two new painting types? Phil has buzzed in.
It's battle ready and is it parade ready?
It is parade ready. Well done, Phil.
Oh, good work, Phil.
Battle ready is the easy one. Parade ready is where you put a little more detail and you buy all the other paints, not just the contrast ones.
So what they're saying is lazy painting and putting in an effort.
Basically.
Yeah.
Always the way it goes.
Question 4. As I reset the buzzers before Phil tells me off. At Warhammer Fest, which model was used as an example for every shade of contrast paint? Oh, Phil's buzzed in.
Oh, Phil.
Intercessor Space Marine.
That's correct. It was a Space Marine Intercessor.
I was so close.
Phil's storming ahead after the
He's a right
intro
eager
round.
beaver on this one, isn't he?
He knows his paints.
Got to get my crown back.
So we have now finished the introduction round, which was the homage to contrast. The next 10 questions are all us looking back on a different time, a time of 2 thin coats. And the following questions are all based around the lovely official Games Workshop How to Paint series. And require you to tell me exactly how many paints are required to paint the model. The theme. The reason for this is because contrast paints are the greatest part about those is you can do your shading, your highlights, all through one thick coat. I'm not saying that to market for them. I just think it's really great, and I'm really excited for these paints. But all of the existing models have all had, well, most of them have had a Games Workshop like How to Paint video with a lovely Duncan, and they'll tell you how many paints you would need from the range to paint them. So this is more than you would need now. So this is the kind of point of saying there's much less paints are required to get all the different colours. So we shall begin. Well, we'll do an example first, just for the sake of it.
Okay.
As an example, we have Saint Celestine. No points available for this one, so you can just shout in if you have an answer. How many different paints, according to the Games Workshop How to Paint guide, is required for Saint Celestine?
13.
40.
I was going to say about 14.
40.
Dan, you were closest. The answer is 28.
All right, there you go. Way.
28 different paints this is just a quote. This is all the videos. It says here's the paints you need to paint this model. It's 28 for Saint Celestine.
Are we going to do whoever gets closest to on this one?
Yes, we are going to do whoever gets
Exact
closest.
amount.
We can do whoever gets closest. Whoever buzzes in first gets to put their number first.
Right.
So there's nothing to stop you buzzing in immediately to get the first guess. So
Right,
the first question: how many paints are required for painting a Cadian shock troop?
I'll go out murdering.
Joey Jojo has buzzed in first. How many do you think?
I'm going to say 11.
Joe says 11. Just to clarify, if you do get it spot on, then no one else after you gets to have a go. So Joe's going with 11. Dan or Phil going to buzz in? Dan's buzzed in. Who are you going to go with?
13.
13 from Dan.
I'll say 14, man.
Oh, Phil.
I'll squash you in there.
Here's the worst part for all of you. It is 14.
Hey! Well done there. Clever. Clever.
So we're at 14 colours that was required for the Cadian shock troop. This is where kind of the flow of the game goes for. So we had 14 for a Cadian shock trooper. Resetting the buzzers. The next model is an Ultramarines Tactical Marine. How many colours?
I'll go out murdering.
Joey Jojo's buzzed in.
I'm going for a good 23.
Joe's gone for 23. It's not right. It's not spot on. Or rather, it's not spot on.
Feel free to buzz first, Phil.
I am this time. I actually think it's going to be less, so I'm going to say 11.
Phil's gone 11. Dan?
9.
9 for an Ultramarines Tactical Marine.
Yeah.
So Joe, you were 23, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So Joe has won. It was 18.
18.
Jesus.
Really? 18 paints.
18 different shades.
Blue.
So it's including it's all different blues, reds, yellows, golds,
jeez.
metals, everything.
I would have thought they would have maybe like 3 blues, a black, a grey highlight.
Which is why I was excited for this round, because now you just slap on some blue and some black and maybe some red for the eyes. Done. You need 18 different colours back in the day. Okay, so we had 18 for the Ultramarines Tactical Marine. Mixing things up. How many do you think there are for a Blood Angel Tactical Marine? First in is Dan.
14.
Dan's gone for 14. Joe?
16.
Joe gets it. 16 is correct.
Oh,
Joe?
Joe!
Yes.
Why is it less than the Ultramarines?
I
Because
don't
they
know why,
pay
but I thought it'd be very dramatic for the quiz.
Sometimes they use different techniques though as well on different videos,
True.
so that one might have just been like a dry brush special or something. So
I was assuming it would be higher. Oh well.
well, it depends which version of it they're doing because the videos are never done to the same standard. Sometimes they're trying to do them quickly, and maybe I don't know.
Like,
Oh,
most like
sort of standard.
Dark Angels and Angels, they just tend to go all red, and then the gun's black, and then you've got the silver bits and the eyes, and that's it.
There you go. Which is exactly the same as whatever the other Marine was, the Ultramarine, but maybe not. Oh, no, because actually because you've actually not got to do the gold rims and things like that on them. They've just probably got like black, so the black probably becomes. Yeah, I can sort of see now in my mind why that would be too less.
Thank you for accepting the answer.
That's all right. It's all right.
Very most appreciated.
all right.
Okay, buzzers have reset. Next question. Last one was Blood Angel Tactical Marine was 16 paints. Next up, what about for a Death Watch veteran?
What chapter was the Death Watch veteran from?
Just standard. I don't. Well, it's a good question. It doesn't
Was
matter.
it a Black Shield or a Howling Griffin?
I'll go out murdering.
Joe has buzzed in first.
I'm gonna go 28.
Joe's gone with 28. Phil,
Oh, I was going to go for 28, so I'll say 27.
you were right to go 27. It is 27.
Oh!
I was willing you there, Joe. It was so close.
You're such
Okay.
a cheesemonger, Phil.
Okay, we had 27 for the Death Watch veteran. As a reminder, we had 16 for the Blood Angel Tactical Marine. But next up is a Tyranid Termagant.
I'll go out murdering.
Oh, Joe's buzzed in first. How many are you going for, Joe?
I'm gonna go 11.
Spot on.
Oh, well done.
Spot on, Joe.
Hole in one.
Boom!
So I'm almost tempted to give you an extra point for that.
Oh.
For getting it
You should.
spot on. You know what? I will.
Whoa! Controversial!
I will give you a spot on point.
I've got some spot on.
No, that's after.
Pick the
That was
first
after.
person.
You didn't get a spot on. You said one lower than Joe.
That was spot on.
To give you every number less. That's not the same. No.
And the other time you went one number higher than Dan.
And both times they'd worked and been spot on.
Okay, so we had last couple have been 200 Termagant was 11 colours. Death Watch was veteran was 27. How about for Mortarian? And for just to clarify for the listeners at home, I'm referring to the 40k model as opposed to the Forge World model. Phil has gone in aggressively.
I'm going to go really high and say 52.
Phil has gone for 52. It's a strong number. It's not the right number.
I'll go out murdering.
Joe, you can have the opportunity to steal.
I'm gonna go 45.
It's 45. Well done.
What is this heresy? How are you doing this?
I don't know how he's doing it.
He's on a quick Google.
These are a hell of a
hard-
quick
These are
Google.
hard to Google. These are quite difficult to Google because I like just freeze frames on the YouTube videos.
Remember?
Okay, so we have Mortarian at 45. Before that, the Termagant at 11. Next up, we've reset the buzzers. How many different paints are required for Eldrad Ulthwan? Oh, Dan's going in there.
I just got to bugger it. I got to try, haven't I? 21.
Dan's got the 21. It's not spot on. Next up is Joe.
I was literally about to say 21. I'm gonna say 27.
27 for Joe. Phil.
I'm going to go 25.
The answer's 29. That's another point for Joe.
Hey, Joe! God dang.
Okay, we've only got 3 questions left. And we have some tiebreakers in case it gets to that. Not that it matters for you, Dan, but we do have some tiebreakers there.
It's fine.
For Phil and Joe. Actually, let me just check. Do you have a chance of coming back? No, you don't. Never mind.
I've
No, you've got no chance.
I've only got one.
You've got one so far.
Yeah.
Okay. Eldrad Ulthwan was 29 paints. How many different... For the next one, resetting the buzzers. How many different paints are required for painting a Necron Overlord? Oh, Dan's still trying to get involved. What do you think, Dan?
70.
7-0.
God, no.
7-0, yeah.
It's not 7-0.
Oh, what a shocker.
Joe.
I'm going to say 14.
Joe saying 14. Phil?
I'm going to say 12.
So, Dan, the reason why I queried what you said was because the answer is 17.
Oh!
Which means that's another point for Joe.
No. Oh.
Okay, next
Surely
question.
it's cleaned up by this point.
No, there's still all to play for one of you.
What's
Or two of you.
the current score? Obviously,
I'm
only
not
on one.
going to tell you. I'm not going to tell you.
Oh, he's not going to tell us.
No.
Oh, okay,
I mean,
okay.
Dan, you've got no chance.
No, I'm aware of I have no chance. I'm curious
Phil
about...
and Joe are still all to play for the two of these guys.
Oh.
So, second to last question. How many different paints are required for painting Marnius Calgar?
Which Marnius Calgar?
The most recent Marnius Calgar.
The Primaris moment.
I'll go out murdering him.
And Joe has buzzed in first.
I'm going to change my 31.
Gone for 31. Phil, how many do you think it is?
Well, I'm going to be really tactical and say 30.
You weren't quite tactical.
Can I have a guess? Come on now, don't discount me entirely.
Dan has an opportunity to play. It's not just the two of you, although it is.
Yeah, I know, but I'm going to say 40.
You can say 40. You weren't quite tactical. I'm glad I didn't finish my sentence because you weren't quite tactical enough, Phil, because the answer was 34. So it's another point to Joe.
Jeez.
Okay, final question.
Okay, it's because he's got that Tyrannid head on there, you see, and that's the deceptive part of it. You've got to add in the Tyrannid.
Well, yeah, that's true.
It's
Yeah.
the final question. We're going
Thanks.
slightly outside of
Reset the
40K.
buzzers.
Resetting the buzzers. Slightly outside of 40k, or depending on how far you go into the lore or what you want to assume. So the most recent ones we've had was Elval Ulthuan 29, Necron Overlord 17, Marnius Calgar 34. But how many different paints are required, according to the official Games Workshop painting video starring the lovely Duncan, are required for painting Archaon, the exalted Grand Marshal of the Apocalypse?
I'll go out murdering him.
Joe's going in with the first buzz. What are you going to go for, Joe?
I'm going to go in with a healthy 53.
53 for Joe. Phil?
It is high like that. I'll say 56. I'll go high.
56. Dan?
Crazy.
70.
You guys have gone slightly. You've gone a bit too far. He's not that many, but he is a lot. He is 46.
Oh,
So that's another point for Joe.
killing it, Joe. Killing it.
I want to be accused of just gaming it, you see.
So for the final scores are in third place with.
I wonder who it could be.
Is Dan.
Oh,
Surprisingly showing that he needs to work a bit more hard on the painting.
it's true. It's true. I've lost my championship at quizzing to the Paint King.
In second place with 5 points is Phil.
No.
Well done, Phil. Congratulations. Second place. That's good work.
But in
Well
first place with a very comfortable lead with 9 points
Bloody hell.
is Joe. Congratulations, Joe.
Well done, Joe. Well done,
About time.
mate. Good on you. You guessed numbers like a pro.
Yeah. Just remember, if you ain't first, you're last.
That's it. That's it.
It is literally been a guessing game.
Yep. Look at this. The bitterness. He's trying to, poo-poo Joe's achievement.
Joe's the only one of you who guessed something right on the nose. The rest, he's been the most consistent in the round. I think you're being very harsh on him.
I guessed right
Joe-
on the nose twice as well.
Yeah, Joe aced this round.
So when it comes to quizzes, when you need to know something, Joe's not so good. But
When
when
it
he's got to
comes to knowing
shout out numbers, he's on it.
When it comes to knowing how many paints you need to paint a model well, Joe's your man.
Joe is your man. Absolutely. I'm surprised Archeon wasn't higher because he's got like 3 different heads with different colours, and like I would have thought like each one of those heads.
He's
alone.
a lot of him is black. He does use a lot of colours, but most of the kind of dragon is black, and he's black. He's 1 shade more than Mortarion. Mortarion was 45, and Archeon was 46. He was the largest one I could find.
Crikey.
What about Magnus?
I couldn't find his video, so I didn't do him.
There you go. There you go.
I don't think they did one for Magnus.
They did, but I couldn't find it, or they did parts of it.
Yeah, it was wrapped up in all the Warzone Fenris stuff, so it might not be the easiest thing to find because it won't be labelled.
Yeah, so I looked at Knights, but Knights are kind of split into different sections for how many they do it. But these, I try to keep them all the videos where it's like a long video and it goes through every stage of painting it to the GW standard and how many colours at the beginning you'd need.
Well, it was a good quiz, mate. Fun times were had.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. Well, I need to know. I need to think of something new for the next one.
Well, exactly, mate. Exactly.
But I did enjoy this one. I enjoyed this one.
Look,
I hope you did as, and I hope you playing along at home did as well.
Shouting out random numbers along with us. It would have been fantastic.
Just screaming along on the bus or the tube.
Yep. Joe, I'm proud of you, buddy. Now it's a relative, clean sweep, though, right? So now each one of us has won one quiz, and Scary won one as well, but, don't need to mention him, I suppose. But next quiz, there will be a decisive bestest quizzer person in that way, or at least for a little bit, anyway.
You get like a medallion.
Unless you have another guest on.
Well, unless we get another guest on who will inevitably beat us, because they're always much better than we are. We need to take this stuff more seriously. That's what I discern when guests come on. We're clearly not trying hard enough.
That's what grown-ups do. We're not doing that.
Exactly. There we go. Well, brilliant. All right, man. Any closing comments or thoughts, Rich?
Yeah. No, not really. I wasn't prepared for that. I love I'm really looking forward to the contrast paints.
There you go.
I'm looking forward to the contrast paints, and we spend a lot of time over the next coming weeks preparing my new GT list. I don't know if you guys are talking about that yet.
We will talk about
the prep stages.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm starting to think a lot about what I want to take. And should I take something more competitive, or should I run with my fluffy nonsense?
I would suggest something more competitive.
Well, the recent doubles, in a parenthesis singles tournament I went to, I did take Knights because they were the easiest to transport. That was fun, but yeah, not nearly as competitive as it could have been.
Well, there's a small chance that we've already talked about that at length on this episode, so I will presume that we'll.
I hope you mentioned. Did you mention the time that my Vindicator Assassin shot Lamatis in the face at point blank range?
Well, no, you did, because you're required to be present for that whole thing. So.
Oh, that's not being recorded yet?
No, it's not been recorded yet. No. So there you go. But don't worry, I can edit this whole bit out, and it won't.
It's the magic. Let the fans see behind the curtain.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I can leave it in there if you like. I don't mind really in this stage. But there you go. Let's do that bit where I say thanks very much and cheers for checking out the Lookout Sir 40k podcast. You're all wonderful people. So here's that bit. Thank you very much for checking out episode 23 of the Lookout Sir 40k podcast from my good self Dan, Phil, Joe and Rich. We all really appreciate the continued support and love that you share with us, the Lookout Sir 40k people, and we hope that you've enjoyed the episode. And if you have, maybe you'd consider checking us out on Facebook, where we reside within Lookout Sir on Facebook, or you can go to Instagram, although I don't know why you I don't know why you would, because Joe never updates it despite saying that he will. Bad Joe.
No comment.
Brilliant. There you go. This is what we got to deal with, the level of professionalism that does not exist within this operation. It's all Joe's fault.
I didn't even pre-watch this video at the start, which I was supposed to watch.
Well, exactly. But
if I can't watch a 2-minute video, don't expect me to take 2 minutes on the toilet to update Instagram.
Brilliant. There you go. But anyway, there's that, and there are other Instagrams and things that we have below, which will be in the description section. So come check us out, have a chat. It'll be lovely to hear from you. If not, don't worry about it. We won't take it too personally because we won't know any better. So I suppose that's something. Phil's doing Beyond the Tabletop stuff all the time. What have you been working on that one, Phil? What's going on Beyond the Tabletop?
Doing a tutorial on how to make a map for my tank commander.
Oh, your popular tank commander with map picture.
That is the one.
Cashing in on that internet fame.
Yeah, you got it, really.
There you go. Well, there we go. That concludes episode 23 of the Lookout Sir 40k podcast. I appreciate and thank you all. Goodbye, everybody. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.